or if everybody works from the office, it's pretty much a controlled environment.
Right.
But that's not necessarily true, because now even your risk management team work from home. They've got a different mindset. One have to actually start to rethink your security protocols.
Hello and welcome to a whole new episode of Engati CX. I am your host Drishti, and today you folks are in for a treat. We have a digital transformation and cybersecurity expert joining us on our show today. But before I introduce you to our guest, allow me to introduce you to the magic of Engati. So Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform, available across 14 channels with 35,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. Engati has also been recognized as a top platform by TechWorld, INC.com, CIO, and many others. We run the Engati blog, video channel, and the Engati CX podcast, receiving upwards of 400,000 visitors annually. And now for our guest. Gert Botha is the CEO and co-founder of Hiving Technology, a UAE-based innovative product business consultancy that focuses on the development of a range of innovative identity and IoT products for various clientele, spanning from Ireland, South Africa, and the United Kingdom. He is recognized as an experienced thought leader in digital disruption, IoT, and cybersecurity. He also has extensive international experience in providing bespoke business and technology solutions to companies in a variety of sectors, including financial services, banking, retail, automation, public sector, and more. So, hi, Gert. We are really happy to have you on Engati CX.
Thank you.
So, I would like to begin with the first question that we have. That what is self-sovereign identity, and how would that drive an IT framework?
Okay, before we start to before I can really explain what self-sovereign identity is, I need to first look at, what's the IT framework. And it's quite interesting because the IT framework that we still use today, despite all the modern technology, is still the same one that we designed in the 1970s. So we started off with systems that was not connected, and those systems basically had its own identities and it was a silo solution serving a specific purpose.
Yes.
That is still exactly the same today, but we actually over time started to interconnect these systems. And what we've got today is we've got basically a silo with duplicate sort of personal data in every silo that's either outdated or like incorrect or different, and identity linked to that. And it might be a physical identity in the form of a card, like a bank card. It might be a digital identity, etc. So what that basically is creating, it's creating a world where we've got all these different identities, all these pieces of data. And the big question is really about what do we trust on the one hand, and especially from a company or a governance point of view. And then on the other hand, we've got all these users with different identities that makes it quite difficult to obtain services. Now, and if we start to look at the bigger picture, we're basically getting to a stage now where all these different silos of data that we don't really know what's correct, what's incorrect, etc.
Yes.
So using that with artificial intelligence and other modern technologies is a big challenge. So what we see is that big data tries to make sense of all of this, make a lot of assumptions, profile people, etc., and that comes with its own problems. Self-sovereign identity per se has been sort of thought about like in the 1970s already, where we said that a person will actually manage and own their own personal data. Make this data available to whoever requires it when they require to obtain a service. Now, for various reasons, that never took off. And the reason, the most sort of common or the biggest reason is really the fact that the technology made it quite difficult to achieve. With blockchain and ledger type technologies, it became a lot more logical because we can now have a sort of interactions as like a cardex of events, and that made it quite a bit easier. But the problem is still that there's no easy user interface to it. And what basically happens with Ledger is you still need your private and public key structures, etc. And the user still needs to provide something, remember something, etc. So what we're doing at Hiving Technology is really to look at, or we developed the identity with a deep root of trust. Of trust identity points to the set of data that you basically, where every person's data is stored, and that could be anywhere in the world. It could be at any sort of, it could either be in a service that's provided by a government or a private service or whatever is decided. But the identity then points to that set of data, and whenever you want to obtain a service, you can basically do so with by providing that single identity. Now, if you look at the more the mechanics around it, we've got solutions where we've got location-based readers. These location-based readers basically will know what data is required, and it will request that data from you via an app on your phone. So it becomes a very easy way for users to interact with their world. But the most important part of it is every step of the way the data is authenticated, it's provided with permission, and it's only the latest and correct data. The next thing that's really important to understand about it is because there's now only one set of data for a person, that data is comprehensive. So it's worth a lot more than the data that we've got in all these silos.
Right.
Because it's basically, and what we can do with that data is a lot more. But it's now with permission, and it's basically benefiting the person who owns the data directly. So that's really where the world needs to go to. There's no real other way. And there's only, if you look at identity, there's only two options. The one option is on the one hand that you've got central or centralized sort of system identity. Right. And this is sort of sovereign, decentralized identity. And that I can't see how the world can't move there. But that being said, I think there's a lot of resistance in the IT community because it's a different and a new way of looking at it.
Yeah.
And we start to look at implementing that, it's going to disrupt the whole way we do business today and servicing our clients. But what most people don't realize is it gives us so much more to actually personalize and really give people what they need. It also gives us the ability to get people to pull information rather than spam and advertise to them on a consistent basis. So that's just really, if you think about it from an IT framework point of view, it is going to change it because what will drive the personal data side is really then your own set of data rather than these decentralized silo-based data that we see currently.
That's true. It's a different perspective that people are taking, and it is going to be a disruption because currently people have this centralized form, and people are very used to that way of data sharing or storing, if we can call.
You know, the big thing with it is that just think about sort of decentralized data. So my data is in my own space and I manage it.
Yeah.
It's not, so from a hacking point of view, it becomes a lot less attractive because now it means that there is a set of data per person in a different database or a different data structure. So it's not I hack one institution and I get a whole lot of data.
Yes.
But what we can also do with self-sovereign identity, because we've got an identity with a deep root of trust, we can actually secure that data individually.
Yeah.
So your keys and what the device that basically that you use as your identity also generates the keys that protect and secure your data. So it becomes a lot more difficult for hackers to actually get access to that data.
Yeah.
we can also take it one step further. We can start to say, because of legislation like GDPR and so forth, we can provide the data with a smart contract about use and also when it needs to be destroyed. So we can give a company data for them to use now, but with the explicit contractual understanding that they need to destroy it within 24 hours or whatever, and that they can't keep. If you start to look at data, imagine, and I'm going to start to cover some of the topics that might be in some of your next questions. But the next thing that's important to understand is that we've got a lot more IoT type devices. Those IoT devices actually now start to collect personal data. We bring those devices into our homes. They are in our children's toys. They are in our home automation. So from that point of view, there's a lot more data about us that's lying around out there. And the question is, how do we protect that data? Because what you do is, if you sign up for or buy an IoT product like a Google thermostat or something, who owns the data? Google. And all that data basically goes to them. You've got no right over it. When you buy it and you sign up, you lose your right to that data. And it's all these different data sources that actually give big companies the ability to understand more and more about us. Also to sell more and more information about us that can be used by other people. Still, those data are not really, I don't think it's targeted. I think it's very much, the data is really at the end of the day sort of, giving people stuff that they would assume you might want, and a superficial understanding of you. And that's why we find that we just get lots of spam from everywhere because of the data about us that's out there. Now, a lot of that going forward and already at this stage is coming from these IoT devices. So in a self-sovereign identity model, it's really important that we also make provision for those device data to be linked to us. Now, if you think about it today, device data is actually, it's not really owned by anybody because it's a device for IP address on the internet, and nobody that you can keep responsible for it either. So that if that device is hacked and it starts to collect a different set of data because of its ability, or it listens to your conversations at home, or all of that, you won't even know because you don't know where that data is going. So really, when we start to, with a self-sovereign identity model, we need to actually make sure that all those devices update our set of data. And again, we give permission to organizations to then use that data. And the permission might be a once-off, or it might be recurring, or whatever. And a good example, for instance, is you've got a computer in your car. That computer, the data of where you drive to, all your behavioral patterns around that is basically sent to the manufacturer. But in truth, we should actually own that data and only provide the relevant data to the manufacturer so that they can provide a service to us. So can you see that it's really a mind shift change for organizations? Because a lot of organizations, or the majority actually at the moment, think that data is all it's about. Data is power, data is money. So I want to own all my data. But what they don't really see is that the moment that you actually get access to relevant data that can be trusted, you, at the end of the day, have a lot more power. Because that data is real time, it's updated, it's relevant now. So if you ask permission to use it, you can actually service that client much better.
That's true.
And that's what it's all about.
So how can AI and IoT play a role in privacy and security?
I think in AI, I've got a lot of opinions about it, but that I can share with you. I think that a lot of we need to include big data in this question because of these silos of data that's sitting out there. What companies do is they try to actually get to understand people and their behavior. And they use AI basically in the process to try and bring data together and create a profile of a person that will enable them to use the data in their campaigns, etc., and to target people. But the big problem is that with that comes a lot of assumption. So again, you use different data sets. These data sets might not be relevant. They might be outdated, etc. But we because that's all we've got, we actually make assumptions to try and get a set of data that we can work with. Now, don't understand me wrong. There's a lot of value to it. But I think from a privacy point of view, that's a minefield. Yeah. Because I would not like somebody, a government or a company out there, to make assumptions about me based on data that's out there that they don't actually 100% know was generated by me. Yeah. And what you find, and it's interesting. I've got a friend that immigrated from Ireland to Australia, and he couldn't get car insurance in Australia. And eventually he found out that according to them, he has a criminal record. Oh. But it wasn't his criminal record, it was somebody else's that attributed to him through this big data program. So what I'm basically saying is that, yes, there's a lot of value because we get a much better understanding, but there's also danger to it. And especially because that data is not visible to individuals. So I don't know that data is there, and I can't argue it. I can't actually say, oh, okay, I can see that criminal record against my name. I don't have one. Let's rectify it. So it took him like 6 months to determine that this was actually the problem because nobody wanted to tell him why not. So that's the type of thing that happens. So IoT, on the one hand, actually can expose a lot more about people, like I explained. The same with AI. AI can be used to collect and combine data and if there's a problem in the logic or there's a problem in the data, you might end up with stuff that's actually relevant to you, but it might impact you. Yep. I think that's the big thing that we need to start to get away from. So yes, I think our friends at Google is one of the big culprits with this because they collect lots of data from everywhere and they make a lot of sense about it, but we don't know what they've got about us. And we don't even know whether it's relevant or irrelevant. Yeah. And that's really, I think if we start to talk about digital trust, you can't trust data that's not authenticated. And none of this data is actually authenticated. So the self-sovereign identity model makes a lot more sense because what it actually achieves is that everything that you do is recorded. It's recorded in real time. You know when it was recorded, where it was recorded. It's relevant data. Yeah. And if you start to think about things like from an AI point of view, I always laugh. The futurist talks about the robot doctor and all these fancy things that we're going to see. But what they don't say is for an artificial intelligence doctor to really work, you need a set of medical data about that person that you can trust. Now, just think about medical data. It's all over the world. Wherever you visited a doctor or clinic or whatever, that data is basically recorded either in a paper system or a computer system. And it's not simple to just bring it all together and use it. So again, one trusted place where this data is managed, where you as a person can also see and understand it, Bart knows a lot more about. And then we can actually run our robot doctors and everything off that because we know that. Imagine there's assumptions made about a diagnosis is made on assumptions.
It can turn out risky. Like if it had made assumptions on something that I don't have. Like suppose if I have diabetes and if they have given me something which can trigger that and they do not know about it. So it is not like they have very relevant data and it can lead to something dangerous in my body. That we can have that mishaps coming.
Yes, but also not only that, also the fact that you have an allergy or something that could. So it's really important when you start to play with people's lives like that, that you know you can trust the data.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're definitely far away from that. Nothing in the industry that's happening at the moment is really bringing it all together. We're doing more of the same, and we are actually, in my view, unless we stop and say, how do we actually redesign this thing to give us what we really need, we are going to not achieve what we set out to. And at the moment, it's starting to become quite obvious. But everybody is trying to hold on to the little bit or what they've got, and it's like you're a company with a huge investment in software. You're not going to let go of your investment in software. You would want whatever the future holds to fit in with what you've got. And I think we've got a world of companies and people all trying to do that. And at the end of the day, it's going to crash. It's going to get to a point where it's not going to give us what we want unless we fix the problem. And in my view, self-sovereign identity is definitely part of the solution. And it's definitely that base foundation that we require. If you think about security, for instance, security per se, if you have a deep root of trust identity, that is, there's a huge different or a very different security foundation that you can use to protect data all the way through. And that's probably one of our biggest shortfalls at the moment.
Yeah, that's true. So, how can companies ensure that the individual's PII data remains private?
That is a very difficult question because it's actually, again, because there's such a lot of data about people everywhere. And there's no real silver bullet answer to this. There's not a recipe. It's really about designing your governance platforms and protecting the data every step of the way. I think and it's something that most companies think or take lightly because they think it's just a little bit of data that they basically keep about a person. But what they don't understand is if this data falls in the hands of hackers, every little bit of data that they've got, if hackers start to combine these things that they get from everywhere, they again build a profile.
Yeah.
And I've seen demonstrations where, small company data becomes a huge or gives a huge understanding of a person from their identity, where they basically live, their bank card details, their birthdays, their parent names, all of that stuff comes from different sources. So it doesn't matter what data you keep about clients, you need to make sure that that data is properly protected, or rather don't keep it.
Right.
And I think the main thing is, like I said earlier, people think that data is power. And, like if I can send out 1 million emails per month or WhatsApps or SMS or whatever, that's giving me power. It's actually not. If that's not properly targeted and it's not really speaking to what your clients want, all you're doing is you make a lot of people angry. And it's interesting, like I can give you a personal example. I've got a .NET personal account or a email address that ends with a .NET. And because of that, for some reason, I get all the American spam. From like fixing your roof to name it, security systems, cars, tires, and it's like hundreds of emails a week. That's totally irrelevant. So that's not our ideal world, and it's just getting worse and worse because as people get more and more data, they try to get value from that data by just pushing it out there.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to a point where consumers will say no more. And I don't think that's very far. If you look at the surveys that's been done recently, people are starting to say, I want my data to be private. I don't want all this irrelevant stuff. I'm going to only focus on stuff that adds value to me.
So, do you think on-premise chatbots can provide the security for these pieces of data?
I think it depends on how you deploy it. My answer will be no. Because it's not really about how you collect the data, but it's really who's going to see it? How do you protect that data after you've collected it? Chatbots can also be quite dangerous depending on what data you collect with it. So, if it's very question-answer based, you've got control over it. If you ask people some question that's quite open-ended, they're going to give you an answer. That answer might contain data that you don't that should actually be, be held private. So it's really important when you start with chatbots to partner with somebody that's an expert, to look at the design of it, to make sure that firstly you and your partner understand exactly what you want to achieve with it. And then basically that data that you collect, you need to protect like any other data that you collect through any other channel. Otherwise, it's not going to give us the benefit.
So, what security concerns are most companies facing during this pandemic, and how can we combat these concerns?
I think there's quite a lot of security concerns, and it's mostly because what's happening is all of a sudden your security environment looks different. We work in an environment. If everybody works from the office, it's pretty much a controlled environment.
Right.
But that's not necessarily true because now even your risk management team work from home. They've got a different mindset. One have to actually start to rethink your security protocols. You also need to your staff that's working on at home all of a sudden have a different mindset. They're not vigilant. They've got children and family at home. They're worried about people that's sick, and all of that stuff is creating a different mindset. So it's very much open for social engineering now. And the vigilance is totally different. We also expose more data about ourselves when we're at home because you're in a different environment.
Right.
So one needs to still keep the privacy and security basically in check. Also, I think that, like from a system point of view, one needs to look at ensuring that your endpoints at home is secure, that they've got all the antivirus and all the right security software on it. And I think in this time, what's quite useful is for companies to actually use external providers to run audits for them and to make sure that they properly protect it. Because it's just the fact that the environment is totally different, our people work in different places, etc. It just opens up a whole lot of areas that we didn't even think about before.
Yeah, that is true. Like at home, we are at a higher risk of exposing much more data than we could have in our offices. Definitely.
Yes, and we are less focused now. One is there's more distraction. It's a different environment. You're also a lot more relaxed when you're at home than what you are when you're at the office. So from that point of view, I think it is quite important for companies to really look at the basics. We can't assume that our security protocols and everything that we've got in place when people are working from the office are necessarily going to be good enough now that we've got a workforce that is working from home and often from different countries.
So, any other thoughts that you would like to leave with our audience?
Not really at this stage. I think we've covered quite a lot. I think the main thing, my sort of passion is really about the sovereign identity and the fact that we need to re-look at how we're doing things. And I've elaborated quite a bit on that. It's been good talking to you.
Yeah, it was wonderful talking to you as well. So thank you so much, Gert, for giving us your time. Your insights were really valuable, and the points that you have shared on how privacy and security are hindered, I think those are insightful, and the audience will also enjoy this interview.
Thank you very much.
So we'll be back with a new episode with a brand new expert soon. So stay tuned, and we'll see you around for the next one.